I'll say third thing is really finding something that makes you really uncomfortable and pushing yourself to do it within reason, of course. Like, some things you're uncomfortable with, it's not worth doing. I know a big thing for me was when I worked at the gas station, I would get like really anxious when a customer came in because I really had like bad social anxiety. And I knew that if a customer came in, that meant they had to come to the register to buy something, most likely at some point. At least most people will do the gas station. The gas stations want that. And I was nervous to talk to them because I knew I had to ring them out. So I was like, man, I don't really want to talk to this guy because I'm nervous. And so I made a challenge for myself at the time. If someone comes up to the counter, you have to look them in the eye. You have to say hi, with them, try to learn one thing about them. And that's your challenge. That was my challenge. People come up, I'd say hi, look them in the eye as best as I could without trying to break contact or looking down, looking too nervous, and try to memorize one thing. As uncomfortable as it feels when I first did it, I noticed that the more I did it, the more your body, like, once it's all done, the more your body is like supercharged. You feel
that wasn't bad.
Yeah, I was like, those are like three main things. There's a lot more I did technically because it's like a several year process. But those are like the main three things, I would say.
So that's pretty cool. And I do agree, like, how I changed myself, because I was totally scared to go to school. Like, you got accepted to a big time college, right? And I was totally scared to go to school at first. That's why I kind of joined the military, because to give myself time to really work out the jitters, right? And it just made it worse. So. Today's guest is a true example of what it means to fall, rise, and grow stronger than ever. Lenny Richardson, also known as Leviticus Rich, has lived a full and tough life with moments of powerful comebacks. He got kicked out of college, not just once, guys, but twice. He battled depression, he felt lost, but instead of giving up, he found a new way forward. He discovered the ancient idea and living for meaning, purpose, and peace. And it changed everything, and I mean everything, about him. Now, Lenny is a business developer, podcast host, top productivity coach, and author. He built his own company to help others live better, more focused lives. He runs one of the hottest podcasts in the DMV, and he helps people build what he calls the pillars of Udemy. Lenny's story is raw, real, and inspiring. He's not just successful and articulate, he's purposeful. Let's give an incredible human being his flowers today as we drive and as we dive into the journey of someone who turned pain into power and failure into focus. Please help me welcome Lenny Richardson.
Appreciate you for having me on. That was an amazing introduction.
Thank you. Usually I have my thing set up, but it literally just went down. Like, literally, as soon as we got on, it's like, beep, and I tried to raise it back up again and have everything set up, and then it's like, so I was like, yeah, well, I'll try it from memory.
That was incredible. If that was from memory, that was incredible.
Thank you. I was trying. Like, so, Lenny, you've been very open on your podcast, on Instagram, different social media sites about your early 20s, getting kicked out of college, right? Not just once, but, like I said, twice, and battling deep depression during that period of time. Can you take us back to that time and describe what rock bottom felt like for you?
Yeah. So, I think pretty much where most of, I guess, the main thing that's been like the catalyst for the self-improvement journey. Went to Penn State, for anyone that's familiar, to college in Pennsylvania, big university. And initially when I went there, I had a scholarship for engineering. I was kind of in between doing industrial engineering, architecture engineering and biomedical engineering. Had a scholarship. And around sophomore year, when I was trying to kind of declare my major and really figure out which of the engineering majors I wanted to kind of pursue, I opted out and chose neither, and instead did, at the time, like journalism and English, and lost my scholarship, which I didn't really think through. So of course, when I lost my scholarship, I couldn't afford the tuition. One thing led to another, and I think it was like December, I forget the exact year, like 2010 or something like that. I got a very polite letter from Penn State pretty much saying, don't come back. Like, you can't come back
What?
next semester. And this is like December, I got this letter. So I'm like kind of panicking, like, oh no, what's going on? Like, where do I go in January? Kind of got launched into the whole living in the real world type thing. Had to get a job. Had to get a lot of jobs at the time because one was not enough to afford rent. Had to learn how to budget, all of that stuff. Sort of just like the combination of everything happening so quickly, plus me already being like socially awkward and not good finances. At the time, I was really out of shape. Everything combined just led to a lot of depression. And so for me, just kind of working, struggling, but not wanting to be in that situation, I would just constantly ask myself, like, how do I get out of this situation? What do I do to get out of this? Who can I go to? I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have any people around me to ask. Especially when it's a college campus, you don't want to tell other students that, you feel depressed and you're struggling. And so I went to the library, read some books. One thing led to another. And I learned about this concept of eudaimonia. And that's kind of the thing that kind of changed, I would say, most of my life, that idea of eudaimonia that you mentioned earlier.
And that's always like crazy to me, how like we can be given one idea, we can be just somewhere, read a book, and just a concept comes up and it just shifts our perspective. What do you think that is? Like, is it timing? Is it just being at the right place at the right time? Or is it you were prepared for something to change you because you felt like you had no other options?
I think it's a bit of timing. I think it's a bit of a lack of options. I think it was a lot of pain. I think that was the main word that sums it up. Just a lot of like discomfort and a lot of pain. I think that's kind of what really made me like really start to ask the questions and really try to figure out what that next step was. I tell the story, and I know this sounds like kind of it's going to sound a bit ridiculous, but I'll tell you about like how I felt at the time. So I know like one of the worst moments that I can recall, I was working at this gas station called Snappy's in Pennsylvania, like right off of Penn State. And it's kind of hard to describe, but like I was the cashier, and to the right of me is like this huge window where you can see into the parking lot. And I remember I would always, since I was so broke and I had like no money, I would take like every shift I could. And one of the easiest shifts to take was the afternoon shift, especially on Fridays and Saturdays. Because
why is that?
Because the afternoon shift was it was from like I think 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. until 2 a.m. So
okay.
No one wanted that shift, especially in a college town. That's when the bar, that's cutting into bar time. So no one wants to work until 2 a.m., especially like right when the bar closes. But I would take those shifts. And it was always like stressful, and I would always feel bad because I'd see all these students like walking, around like 11 p.m. They come in, they get their drinks, they get papers for miscellaneous activities. And they leave and they're walking to the bars. And I remember one day I'm just kind of watching like a group of kids walk by, and they look like they're having a lot of fun. And I sit there and say to myself, I am making a huge mistake because I'm not even taking classes right now. I'm just working at a gas station. I feel like I'm going nowhere in life. And meanwhile, these dudes are out here, these dudes and girls are out here just having fun, going to the bars, enjoying every weekend. I'm working every weekend, like consistently every weekend. I didn't really go out pretty much all through college. Like I did go out, but it wasn't nearly as much as most people would. Like Penn State's known for football. To this day, I'm not going to an actual football game because when I was a student, I just worked through all the football games because that's when the shifts that no one wanted. But yeah, so I think there were moments before that were kind of like painful. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but that was kind of a moment where I really felt the most pain. I think just because it put everything in perspective, like I'm not in shape. I have like no money. I don't have time. Nothing's going right for me. How do I fix this so I'm not in this situation forever? But yeah, pain I think would be the main word to kind of, I guess, say why, the thing that triggered everything else.
No, I got you. And during those dark days, working multiple jobs. Like you said, you work in that off shift, that time frame from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. Just to stay afloat, right? Dealing with debt, disappointment. Did you ever feel like giving up? Like
Yeah,
for real?
every other day, to be honest. Um, yeah, literally, like often, I kind of thought to myself, "Why am I doing this to myself?" Like I could probably just go back home and move in back with the parents and try to figure something out. Take a few
Yeah.
years and just kind of work and not pay rent because I'll live with them, and then kind of just build things back up. Try to get back into college and progress through life. Um, I guess I could have done that, but I think at the time a lot of that was kind of just a little bit of ego, a little bit of embarrassment,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little bit of pride. You just don't want to tell your parents that you feel like a failure or a loser. At least for me, that's how I felt. So I never really saw that as an option. Yeah. It just literally every other day though, the kind of thought crossed my mind, like I should just give up and just go home and stop trying this.
Yeah.
I think too, I will say, especially when I try to really get into self improvement,
Mm-hmm.
um, the thought often crossed my mind of I just kind of want to give up. Like I would sit there and think to myself often because I would try to I was getting in better shape at the time.
Yeah.
Kind of after this, a little bit after this whole like story of me seeing the people outside, I would try to work out more. I would try to talk to girls more, try to understand money better and struggle with seeing my paycheck immediately go to rent and trying to figure out how to make that work. Um, really like every other day I would just sit there and think to myself, is this even worth it? It's like
Yeah.
this is probably a better option. I don't need to go to the gym. I don't need to try to like impress these girls. I can probably just give up and go home. But yeah, so long-winded answer, but yeah, I felt like giving up pretty much every other
No,
day.
no, it's not long-winded at all. Like it is, like it's amazing because you know what it is. Like for me as a parent, I could just, and I said this to myself. I didn't get a chance to say it to my kids as they proceed to go to college, and but I always heard the saying where, "Hey, if something happens, you can always come back home." Right? But I could just, and as a parent, I can see why we say that, right? But as the child receiving those words, what, I guess you said it was a little bit of pride and stuff like that. The reason why you didn't reach out to go back home. Did you tell your parents about that situation?
No, not I initially no. For a long time, I didn't tell them. I mean, they knew about me not being able to go back to
Mm-hmm.
college. But I did my best to find like an apartment, and I thought I could afford it when I first applied for it.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly enough, they were really the apartment I applied to was kind of lax about income requirements because I didn't have a job when
Uh-huh.
I applied to the apartment. I think my mom probably co-signed it, so they probably figured if he doesn't pay for it, she's going to pay for it.
Yep.
But yeah, like initially they didn't really. I know my dad didn't ask like any questions at all. My
Mm-hmm.
mom, I told her a little bit about me getting kicked out, but I never really told her about how I felt while this whole thing was going on. It really, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, it really wasn't until maybe about 3 years ago, like literally 3 years ago, that I really ever told her how I felt like at that time.
Wow.
And then, this is all us talking, and this is like, I think when I got kicked out in 2012 or 13, I graduated in 2017. So we're talking
Okay.
about a span of 3, 4, 5-ish years that this was all going down. In this podcast, you heard bits and pieces, so it sounds like it's all happening. It sounds like a small period of time, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, for a long time I never told anybody, but especially not my parents.
Wow.
She'd call and say, "How are things doing?" "Oh, they're good, mom. They're good, dad. They're fine." And meanwhile, I'm thinking to myself, like, why do I even bother? Why do I even
Yeah.
work these terrible jobs? I can just go home right now and just give up, go to a different school, start over.
Yeah. Trust me, I get it. I get it. 100%. Yo, that's pretty amazing. Everyone who's listening, please, 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 if you have any questions, please, the chat is open. As we go through the conversations, I'm going to periodically look through and then ask the questions live. So please, if you have any questions at all, we are here. And also, I guess one of our guests said the volume is a little low. I'm not sure if you can comment about whose volume is low. I'm trying to work it on my end. I raised it up as high as I can. So if you can say which one of us has our volume low, we will correct that as soon as possible. Thank you. But man, that's crazy. So what was the hardest moment in all that period? What kept you like, you going through, you trying to make ends meet? What kept you trying to hang on even when hope was really hard to find?
I think it was a few things.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say one of the biggest things that really, I guess, motivated me a lot. And I want to say this for anyone watching that knows me personally. This is no shade to anyone that knows me. But when I was working at the gas station, one thing that really motivated me a lot, I used to work at a gas station and at a bar. Usually, those are like the main two things. At the gas station in particular, there were a few people that worked there that were older than me, like in their 40s. And I think one lady was in her 50s or so, or maybe like early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very negative about the job. They were very great. They were great people, very nice people, super friendly to like their coworkers and people that knew them. But when it came to working at a gas station, very negative, it was almost like depressing to hear the way they would talk about the past 10, 20, 30, however many years they were working there. Because you can tell they were there for a while, and you can tell that, the gas station, I assume, despite them working for a decade or so, wasn't paying that much more than what I was getting paid. And I think when I started, I was getting paid like $7.50 an hour, so not very much.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like 40 hours a week either. It was like 20 hours, 30 hours, whatever I could get. But in my mind, I thought to myself, even though this is so uncomfortable, the situation, and it's very depressing, I don't want to be them in 20 or 30 years. And again, no shade to them, because they're actually very nice people. Like, after I graduated, I would still go back and I would still see them and chat with them. That's why I don't want to say this is like shade towards them.
Oh, of course. Nice.
But when it came to, I think, their view of them at that job, and I think how their lives turned out at that job, and in general, I would say, but it was so negative, I thought to myself, I can't be that person. And I think that's kind of what made me like ask more questions. Like, how do I not be them for the third time? No shade to them. But, but like, that was really like my thought process. Like, I really don't want to be, I would sit there and think, I don't want to be that 44-year-old dude who is like super happy because this is his like full-time job and he's always struggling to pay the bills and he's always unhappy, still single. I don't know. I just really thought like, I can't let this be me. So how do I not let this be me? And then that whole thing of eudaimonia was kind of the in a way, like the answer to the problems that I had. And for anyone listening that's not familiar with eudaimonia, it's sort of like a Greek framework for essentially for living a good life, for self-improvement. And I call them pillars. The Socrates just says that it's health, wealth, and relationships. If you're decent in all those areas, then you'll live a good life. So, and then once you hear that, it sounds basic and it sounds simple, but then you also notice that the people who probably complain the most in life, the people who are doing the worst in life, are probably heavily lacking in probably all three, but at least two consistently. So yeah.
No, man, wow, that's 100%, and I totally agree with that. I was thinking about like a coworker of mine, and they said this quote, and it still sticks with me. They still say it to this day. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Absolutely.
And that is what you were saying about me being 40 years old, not me, but you being 40 something years old and still being there. And again, there wasn't any shade, but it was just like, it seemed to me like it was a wake up call for you. And it was like, that was at your lowest point. You started to see things differently, than your peers. You also wrote, I wasn't behind. I was just playing a different game. And you said, I wanted to play a game of life for the big prize. How did you adopt that boldness, that mindset, that view to say, I want to play a different game instead of failure and just to stay down in discouragement?
Yeah. So I forgot when I even wrote that. That's funny that you found that. Yeah. So a little bit, I'll be honest, a bit of that when I first came up with that idea was me thinking about my past self and almost kind of giving a little bit of cope to the situation I used to be in. But then like the more I thought about it, the more I kind of realized that what's a good way to put this? I think sometimes in life, the people around you, I'll call it society, they give you a path to walk down. And I think what most people do is they sort of just accept that path. And the way I think about it is if you're walking down the path, like if everyone's walking the same path, they're all going to get to the exact same destination. Sometimes it's okay to go in a completely different direction, and it might look weird up front and it might feel uncomfortable, but it could get you to a better destination. And so what I mean by that is it's almost kind of like when you see someone in high school who peaks too soon, like they're going down a certain path. They're going down the path of I know it's like a stereotype or a cliche, but like the star athlete or the guy or girl who's like super cool and like college is everything for them. And then once they get past, like high school is everything for them. And then once they get past high school, they cap off and then nothing changes. They don't get any better. To me, the way I think about it is they went down a certain path and they got the results based on the path that they went down. My thought process was, I'm going down a completely different path because this is the path of extreme discomfort while everyone's, at least in my opinion, very comfortable. Like when everyone's partying on the weekends or just going out or hooking up with girls or doing whatever, I'm the only person here at 2 a.m. working at the gas station or working at the bar until 3 or 4 a.m. When everyone is just drinking, I'm the only person concerned about getting in shape. When everyone's, just kind of coasting through life, not studying, not taking classes seriously, I'm the only person that's being bothered to learn more skills or to learn more things. And so I'm going down a completely different path. It sucks right now because no one's on this path with me. But my thought process was, in the long term, it'll be a more rewarding pathway. It'll be the path that takes me the furthest away from the people I knew at the gas station that weren't happy with the path they took, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. You know what's amazing about that is because, like, even with that philosophy, that boldness that you had, I love that you can now talk about your past so candidly and so openly and without shame or regret. And in fact, I remember one video intro, you said, I actually got kicked out of college twice. And you said that, and you said, and it shows that in my summation, you kind of made peace with that in a lot of way with those failures. How did you reach that point when you could wear that past setbacks as a badge of honor instead of a source of shame?
Yeah. So I have this other weird philosophy. I like to kind of, what's a good way to put this? In my mind, I have a belief that like, I don't want to get like overly philosophical about it, but I have a belief that like good and bad don't really exist. And really what it comes down to is how you perceive what's happened. So like, I think for some people, like I'll say I got kicked out of college twice. And someone like my mom gets upset with me because she'll probably see this podcast or she's seen other ones in the past. And she said, why do you tell people that? That's not good to tell people. And it's like, it sounds bad to say you got kicked out of something because I think the first thought people have is, oh, he must be dumb or he must be inferior in some way. In my mind, it's not a bad thing. It's a fantastic thing because it lets me choose a different path that no one else is taking. No one, like most people, if they take the standard route, they go through college, they get the standard job, they live the standard lifestyle, which is fine if they want to do that. But like I said, it leads to a specific path, not the path that I would. So I don't know. I think probably over years of kind of thinking back on it.
Yeah.
I kind of realized like getting kicked out was actually probably one of the best things that could happen to me because before I got kicked out, I was super, like I mentioned earlier, very socially awkward, super like anxious around people all the time. Couldn't speak at all. Like the idea of me back then doing any podcast at all, there was a 0% chance that it would ever happen because I would have been too uncomfortable to get on camera. Literally, like actually my first, I tried to start a business after I got kicked out because I needed to make some more money. I thought I could make some more money. And one of the things I wanted, I kind of thought would help, and it took me a long time to start doing it, was make videos of myself. And this was kind of still like when YouTube was relatively new-ish. I really wish I had done it more back then. But I was nervous and anxious, and it took a long time for me to like push myself to even put even like a short video out. But, getting kicked out allowed me to, it kind of forced me, not even allowed me, it forced me out of that comfort zone. I think had I just gone the standard route, going to college, all that, I would have stayed so comfortable that I would have never tried to start a business or teach myself things. I probably wouldn't have bothered to even try to stay in shape because, if I had to guess, I probably would have found a girlfriend towards the end of college, maybe got married at 21 or 22, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I got married or got a girlfriend too soon, I wouldn't have cared about my health as much. So it just kind of creates a snowball effect. I get long winded, but without being too long winded, I like to view like the bad of getting kicked out twice as like good.
Yeah.
Like it's almost I'm a nerd about stuff like this. We're on an anime podcast. It's almost like when you see any main character in a anime, like a battle shonen, what looks bad on the surface could easily just be like the best possible thing. Solo leveling's big now. Solo leveling, Jinwoo, the main character, gets like his leg chopped off in the first episode, arm chopped off or whatever, and that's like the thing that prompts him to become Aura Farmer Jinwoo. So it seems bad on the surface. Obviously, that's a bit extreme, but it seems bad on the surface. But I think anything, if you allow it, could be a positive. Any negative could be a positive.
I totally agree with that. And like you said, it's all about your perspective and how you see things. And I believe a lot of times, I think that's the catalyst, I guess, of what we perceive as bad and what we perceive as good, right? If a situation happens, life is life, right? Life is just life, and it happens. And then all of a sudden, we go like, man, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. And then someone else see your perspective and be like, man, that's the best thing that could ever happen to you, because, they could say that. And it's just amazing, like, to me, how you can see that. So after your awakening, I would say, what concrete steps did you take to rebuild your day-to-day life? For example, I know you developed a habit. I think you read a book a week, if I'm not mistaken, during that time frame. What other daily habits or routines, mindsets to help you climb out of that hole?
Yeah, so there's a few things I did. One of the main ones, and this is what I recommend everyone do: go to the gym more. I know it sounds like super basic, but I'm a big believer that I think, to me, like, if you exercise, not only does it make you feel good from just a pure aesthetics perspective, if you get in better shape, I truly think that it helps your like brain just process information better. And it doesn't need to be extreme. You don't need to. I tell people, like, you don't need to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger and try to be Mr. Olympia. 20 minutes of even running is still exercise. I think that's perfectly fine. It doesn't need to be extreme. But I think like the idea of moving around and like moving your body is super beneficial from just a pure aesthetics perspective and just from how you feel and like a self-esteem perspective. So that's what I started doing a lot of exercise. A lot of things that I would do is I just try to find people who were like further ahead of me and just mimic them. Like whatever they did, I would just copy them. If they talked a certain way, I would copy them. If they had a certain routine, I would copy them. One of the biggest people I copied back then was Dwayne Johnson, because I was like a huge fan of, like, my friend got me to WWE. I was a big fan of WWE. And he started getting into the movies. That was like really when he really first started kind of reinventing his career. Going from like Scorpion King, Dwayne Johnson, to like the Dwayne Johnson we know of today, where he like shaved his head and all that stuff. No longer had the fanny pack. But yeah, I remember seeing like an interview with him, and they were asking like, what's your routine for success? And he said he'd wake up at 5 a.m. and work out like first thing. So I figured, okay, Dwayne Johnson does it, and if it works for him, I'll do it too.
Yeah.
And like to this day, I still, for the most part, sometimes I oversleep. Like this morning, I overslept. But for the most part, I'll still wake up at about 5 a.m. and work out. So that was one of the main routines at the time that I did. Planning my day, that was a huge routine. Like that's still something I do to this day that I think sounds super simple, but for me was like a huge game changer. Those are like the main two things I would say. Really trying to find, I'll say a third thing is really finding something that makes you really uncomfortable and pushing yourself to do it within reason, of course. Like some things are uncomfortable and they're just not worth doing. I know a big thing for me was when I worked at the gas station, I would get like really anxious when a customer came in because I really had like bad social anxiety. And I knew that if a customer came in, that meant they had to come to the register to buy something, most likely at some point. At least most people, hopefully the gas station would want that at least. And I was nervous to talk to them because I knew I had to ring them out. So I was like, man, I don't really want to talk to this guy because I'm nervous. And so I made a challenge for myself at the time. If someone comes up to the counter, you have to look them in the eye. You have to say hi, have a conversation with them, try to learn one thing about them. And that's your challenge. That was my challenge. So people come up, I'd say hi, look them in the eye as best as I could without trying to break contact or looking down and looking too nervous, and try to memorize one thing. As uncomfortable as it feels when I first did it, I noticed that the more I did it, the more your body, like once it's all done, the more your body is like supercharged and you feel
Yeah, that
way
wasn't
better
bad.
about it. Yeah, I'll say those are like the three main things. There's a lot more I did technically because, this is like a several year process. But those are like the main three things I would say.
So that's pretty cool. And I do agree, like how I changed myself. Because I was totally scared to go to school. Like you got accepted to a big time college, right? And I was totally scared to go to school at first. That's why I kind of joined the military, because to give myself time to really work out the jitters, right? And it just made it worse. Yeah, it just made it worse because I took I made my first testable rank, which is a E5, and I became a sergeant. And I was like, okay, I'm going to school because I'm going to be an officer. And to be an officer, you needed to have at least a bachelor's degree. So I took my first class. I'm like, man, this is easy. I love it. Cool. My second class kicked my butt. And I was like, and it was my fault. Totally, I take 100% responsibility because I should have emailed the professor a lot more. Did email the professor, but I was kind of like waiting for a response, and I kind of never got one. So instead of emailing the professor consistently and going even higher, I didn't. And so I kind of like got in that slump after 2 weeks, and it's like, oh man, I can't drop this class. And so I kind of like avoided it. And then, I'm not sure if you know anything about the military. So, if you fail a class, you gotta pay that. You gotta pay that money back.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. So I had to pay that money back for that course, and I was like super like, I am not ever going to school right again. And so because to block that pain, right? And for years, I've been in 23 years thus far, and I was like, I would never go back to school. And then finally, I was like, I really need to progress in my career. I really need to grow. I'm not saying that you need to go to school to do that, but it is a benchmark, I know, for me, right? Because it's me facing my fear. And so long story short, I ended up facing my fear with my wife's help, and basically now helped me to get my master's. But I tell that story to say, like, I started somewhere, right? From my journey, I started like you read a book once a week. I actually started reading a paragraph a day. I like, hey, no matter what, I'm going to read this paragraph because I thought I was dyslexic. And so I started small. And then as soon as I started to handle more, I was able to handle more and then progress accordingly. So I know that sounds really, really simple, guys, but for me, it wasn't. Yeah.
It's funny though, because like the simplest things I feel like are the most effective things. Like I feel like people think everything needs to be so complicated.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't overcomplicate it. Like the simplest thing you can do is probably the best thing possible. Like, I had a friend of mine like years ago. She had a New Year's resolution. I think it was like run a marathon or something. And January comes around and she tries to go like full sprint. Like I want to run like miles per day. And so I was asking her like, when's the last time you've run? Period. Oh, like high school. And then this is while we're in college. I was like, why do you think that after not running for like 4 years in high school, you're going to suddenly run miles tomorrow? Like maybe start with like just running for a minute per day. And then like gradually work up over time to however long. Yeah, I don't know how long a marathon is, but a marathon distance. I don't know. So I feel like people feel like if you have to go it's either 0 or 100, where I feel like you can do like 1, then go from 1 to 2, and then you kind of work your way up slowly over time.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think, and also, the science behind it, now that we know is more like, it's because of endorphins, because, you have these little wins, you get endorphins, you're like, oh man, that felt good. And your body naturally wants to win again. And so it looks for those small wins again, as you increase the what's it called? The level in which you do it, then it becomes more worth it, and then more endorphins. And it's just crazy how the human body works, right? Your professional path has been anything but linear, like how you approach things. I think you worked in law. You jumped into real estate. You co-founded a marketing company. I think it was Affinity. And then you even owned a fitness business, the Gym Stop. How did those diverse businesses and experience shape your approach to business and productivity?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start like with how it affected business first, then productivity.
Yeah.
There's going to be overlap, I guess, but I'll start, I guess, with business. I would say that's a good question, to be honest. I gotta think about that for a second. I'll say this: doing all those different businesses, I guess, in a weird way, almost left like a sour taste in my mouth. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I like business, and I like the idea of like capitalism. But I think when you're in so many different fields, you start to see where businesses, how do I put this? Where they're effective and where they're good, and where they're borderline, I'll call it scammy. Like I made a video on YouTube. I think I put it out like a week ago or so, and it was supposed to be a little bit clickbaity, but it was kind of like my views on like modern day businesses, like capitalism. And I think there's such a like big push nowadays to, not with everybody, of course, but with like a small minority of very popular brands or businesses, almost like get the most from customers or consumers without giving much back in return, if that makes sense. Like I feel like business should always be a mutual exchange.
Yeah.
Like you have something that I want in the form of a product or service. Here's my money that I use to pay for it. And I think that's fine. But I think the problem is like a lot of businesses are like, how do we give them nothing? And how do we get a lot from them on repeat for as long as possible without them noticing? And when they do notice, let's try to make it as difficult as possible to give them their money back. So I think from just kind of like being in different types of businesses, you can see where different businesses sort of teeter that fine line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think business too, you learn a lot about yourself. I definitely think like trying to pursue entrepreneurship is certainly like a personal development journey in itself. Like I'm sure you know anyone watching this, if they've attempted entrepreneurship, I'm not even saying like be like successful. Success is subjective in my opinion. You know, put aside any dollar amount. If you even attempted it, that's a self-improvement journey in itself. Like nothing humbles you more than starting a business, thinking it's the best idea on the planet, sending it to like your parents or your friends or whoever, and having no one care. It's just like, I thought this was a good idea. No one else seems to care. Not that it's not a good idea. It's just other people just sometimes aren't interested. But yeah, it's a self-improvement journey in itself. As far as how the business is affected productivity, it's still, I think that's still tied with like personal development. You kind of realize that, I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. I think it makes you think more, like the different businesses made me think more long-term than I initially did, if that makes sense. Like when I first did, the first business I ever had was College Conqueror. I think the first time I got monetized was from like ads. I had a website and I had ads on the website. And my thought process was, oh, I'll become a millionaire in like a year or two. And then you realize after a year or two, like, nah, it doesn't work that way. Maybe, but then you're still kind of like, at least for me, you're still kind of like hopeful. So you're like, oh, well, next year I'll get that $1 million. And then it's okay, this is not what I thought. 10 years later, I might not ever become a millionaire, and that's perfectly fine. At least that's how I see it. So I don't know. I think kind of when it comes to like productivity, time span changes, how you apply your day changes. In the past, I'd be in a rush to cram as much as possible into a single day because I thought that, you know, the goal was to become a millionaire tomorrow. But nowadays I'm more laid back about it. I'm more pursuing business for the sake of the enjoyment of business. And I think it kind of allows me to enjoy other things. I think I mentioned to you, I'm trying to write a comic now. I don't know. I think it just, in a way, the longer you do it, the more you realize that you shouldn't be in a rush. And I think that kind of helps with just making the day feel more manageable, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And you're totally right about that. Like for me, like I think nowadays business is sensationalized to a point where everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but they don't even know kind of like what that really means. And a lot of people think they're starting a business if they're doing a lot of ad affiliation. Like what they, you know, like I see a lot of young ladies and they say like, oh, I'm selling my products. And it's like, no, you're not selling your products. You're selling Avon. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Or whatever product that is, right? And I get you have the spirit, you know, you want to sell stuff, and I get that. But it's like a lot of people, and when I say a lot of people, I'm talking about what I see, I guess, in my viewpoint when it comes to social media. A lot of people see entrepreneurship as I guess it's the trend nowadays, right? I should say. And it's like, how do you navigate, you know, through that? Like you, for example, you have your podcast, Meeting VA. It highlights influential figures across Virginia. I would say, with all that we just talked about, what inspires you to start that show every single day? Especially, I guess you started it in 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
I I think 2018, and like very slowly built up episodes. So it wasn't like very consistent, but
Yeah.
I've had it for a while.
Yeah, and that's perfect. That's just like what's on the Diary of a CEO. He was the same way. He like I wasn't consistent until one day he decided to be consistent, and now he's at 10 million subscribers. But like for you, like, you know, over, you know, you had dozens of guests, you know, people, enlightened conversations, insights, and everything. I guess, what did you gain from that, you know, that experience with those individuals that like genuinely surprised you or changed your own perspective?
From Meeting Virginia.
Yeah, just with all your different interviews and your guests and everything else. What on this journey of self-discovery, what changed as you start meeting more people?
I'll say one big thing, it
Mhm.
made me more social. So that was nice because that was a long-term goal of mine, to be more social.
Mhm.
I think at least for me, it also made me realize that people are, I don't want to use the word deep because I know that sounds like it's not really the best word, but
Yeah.
essentially that's what I'm saying. Like people, they have more layers to them than they might put on
Yeah.
the surface. Um, so when like I had different guests on the Virginia, and I'll give one example. I had a guy on who's a DJ. He was like a really popular DJ here in Loudoun County where I live. And he comes on and we start talking about him being like a chef and just like him doing like all these other hobbies. And I'm just like, what? Like, whoa, I thought you were just a DJ. You do like, you cook too? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm like a great cook. I do like stuff on the side. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I had one guy, I'll give him a shout out because he's awesome. This guy named Andre, he's a pretty popular YouTube channel. I just had him over actually a couple weeks ago. He lives out of the country now, but he was in town. But when I first met him, he was in, I think, the National Guard. I thought about him because you mentioned military. He was in, I think, the National Guard. And then I had him on because he had a pretty popular brand about, I think, the military. He would talk about like, I think it's called like the ASVAB or something like that. I don't really know military.
Oh, the ASVAB.
Okay, yeah, he was telling me about it, and he was just enlightening me with a bunch of things about the military, his experiences, and he had a popular brand from it. And then he starts talking about being a commercial trucker. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I used to do commercial trucking, and I used to work at this like nursing home. I was like, what?
Yeah.
How did we get to this? Not in a
Yeah.
good way. It's awesome.
Okay.
I'm glad we got to this. How did we go from the National Guard to commercial trucking to nursing home? And I think now he still has a YouTube channel now. It's popular. I think he does more like journalism, like police investigation type journalism.
Oh, wow.
But it's just like this transition is crazy, but it's awesome because it's cool to see that other people have more to them than what they might put on, say, social media, or if they have a brand. It's, you know, his brand was National Guard, but clearly there's a lot more to him than National Guard, which is awesome. So I think as I kind of interview people, you just realize that people are very layered and they're a lot more unique and interesting than even they might let on, despite having a brand or despite promoting themselves so much.
You know what? And it's crazy that you say that people are very layered. Like you're very layered. Like just talk about different businesses and stuff you did. Like you created the Productivity Accelerator, which helps busy young professionals, right, and entrepreneurs streamline their productivity. Like, what made you want to do that with everything else that you were doing?
Yes, yeah. So that's like the main thing I'm working on now. That's my primary business.
Okay.
With Productivity Accelerator, so I had a business prior to that led to Productivity Accelerator. Pretty much the way it got started, I used to work when I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but I have to just give like context to this. When I first moved to Northern Virginia, after I eventually graduated from college, I couldn't find a job. And so I ended up working at like Brooks Brothers, and it's like a kind of a suit store for anyone that's unfamiliar with the brand. Worked at American Eagle, another retail store. Did tutoring, and one of my bosses that's around the same time I got my real estate license, and eventually I worked at a law firm. Prior to working at the law firm, one of my bosses at Brooks Brothers, he was like, "How do you do all this stuff?" He was like, "You have like 3 jobs and you do tutoring." And at the time I wrote like a book too. He's like, "You wrote a book, you do a podcast." He was like, "I'm exhausted thinking about you." He's like, "How are you doing it?" And so he told me, he just kind of was like, your time management is pretty good because you're getting all the stuff done that most people, if they even picked one of these things, would never, would struggle to accomplish. Yeah. And I thought about it, and I figured, maybe I could make a business from that. I kind of got some business advice, and someone suggested start a business from it. I tried initially making the business more about eudaimonia, and helping people kind of build those like pillars, health, wealth, relationships. And my thought process was, I have a background with real estate, background with like law a little bit, did a lot of like pickup stuff and dating in college when I was going through my depressed era, and did a little bit of physical training and help people at the gym. So I figured maybe I could combine them, make a business from it. Yeah. The business was too complicated, in my opinion. I think it was too difficult to get most people from like working out to also budgeting to also doing like social stuff and relationship type stuff. And so I kind of figured, what's the thing that is like the glue for all 3 of those like pillars? And that was time management. So I figured instead of just having that business where it's eudaimonia, let me just focus on time management, because with time management, it doesn't really matter who you are or what your goals are. You always have to manage your time to get it done. Like if you want to get in better shape, you need time management. If you want to make more money, time management. If you want to have a better relationship with your partner or meet new friends or go on dates or even guilt-free, be like me and play video games or make a comic, time management. So that became the focus. But yeah, that's kind of how I went from all that to Productivity Accelerator. Productivity Accelerator is the time management business.
Okay. And it seems business is good. So I love that. I love that. I would say through your coaching and your programs that you offer, you work with a lot of people trying to improve themselves. What do you find is the number one obstacle, or I should say sticking point, that holds most people back from progression?
There's 2 that come to mind. Do you mind if I give the 2?
Yeah, do your thing.
So the first one that I see a lot is, this is more for like people when they first start with like Productivity Accelerator or when they're curious. They don't have goals at all. And that blew my mind, to be honest, because it wasn't like a few people. It was a lot of people, probably the majority of people. I'll ask them, what do you want to do with your life? And a lot of them go like, I don't know. I'm not actually too sure what I want to do. I want to be, or they'll say something vague, like I want to be successful. What does that mean? What does success mean to you? And there's no right or wrong answer. Just what does it mean to you? And they'll say, I'm not too sure. I guess I want to be rich. What does that mean? Like, how much money are we talking? But then they might give like a generic answer. I'm gonna be a millionaire. Why'd you pick that number? So you get on the rabbit hole, and it's like you realize that people haven't really sat there and thought about what they specifically want. They might have a big idea of what they want, or they might have like some weird kind of like, I'm going to call it like a fantasy based idea. Like it's not the thing that they want. It's what they're told they should desire. That's the first thing. The second thing, for people who have goals and who are trying to accomplish stuff, I tend to find that people just don't value their time very well. That's a big one. Like I'll see people who I live in Loudoun County. I know a lot of real estate agents, but I'll use real estate agents as an example. None that watch this get mad at me. I've seen real estate agents waste time with activities that don't like, they don't lead to their goals being fulfilled. Well, so I'll give an example. I still work with Weichert. I'm a real estate advisor on the side, but that's not my main thing. I don't do showing listings. When I would physically be at the brokerage working, I would see agents who wanted to get more leads or more clients, and they would spend the majority of their time picking headshots. And my thought process was, you're spending 5 hours today picking headshots. No headshot you pick will get you more business. Maybe there's one out there that might get you an extra client. Maybe. But I don't think this is the main thing that's going to really take your business to that next level that you want to go to. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it's it. And, that's one example, but you see people do that a lot where they're spending time. Maybe it's someone who has a business and they spend all their time just scanning through emails, refreshing their emails all day. And it's like, dude, the emails haven't changed. You got to work on something else now. Or, there's a lot of different examples. But one thing I'll mention that's a big one for me, at least, and it's one that people get very upset about me saying, is phone calls. I'm very weird about phone calls.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm weird about phone calls is because this is just my personal opinion, most phone calls you get aren't that important.
Yeah.
So like what I tend to do with like phone calls and emails and text messages, I block off times to take them. I feel like if a phone call's important, like if it's like a meeting type phone call, kind of like what we did with this, you set aside time to do it and that's perfectly fine. If it's a random phone call to say hi, it sounds mean, I do not answer it. Like I truly, unless it's someone who I haven't talked to in a very long time and this is like a rare opportunity, then I'll take it. But if it's someone who lives like down the street and they're calling at like 2 p.m., hey, I just want to say hi, call back later. I'm busy. And it sounds rude, but the reason why I do that, the reason why I suggest this is because a lot of phone calls, people think it'll be a 5-minute phone call. It's 5 or 10 minutes to do the introduction. It's 25 minutes to just talk about nothing, respectfully to people. It's not like life-changing stuff you're talking about. It doesn't help you achieve your goals most of the time. Yeah. And then it's another 5 to 10 minutes where you contemplate, okay, the phone call's getting a little bit long. I don't want to be rude, but I kind of want to hang up. Do I interrupt?
Yeah.
What am I doing? It just becomes a very long process. And that's one phone call. Imagine if you allow everyone to call you all day, you'll never get anything done. So a big one is phone calls. I'm just heavily against random phone calls, between spam, between the random guy that just wants to say hi, between the guy who does network marketing that wants to pitch you something. It's one of those big things that I see hold people back. And I think that stems from just not valuing your time correctly.
No, man, you're right about it. So we do have a question. A question just popped up, and I'm going to show it on the stream. Here it is from Michael J. Scott. Were you able to see it?
Yeah, I saw it here, and I can see it in the chat over here, though, too.
Okay.
I'm just reading the last sentence. What should I
do? And let's see if we can bring it down. So what's the last sentence? Staying away from jack of all trades, master of none perspective. Yeah. So what I do is when I have clients, I don't give them specific advice on what they should do like within their field. I give them more of like the advice that we give is more of how do we make sure you're getting done the thing you determine to be the most important thing as consistently as possible. But ultimately, it's for the person to decide what's the best strategy for them. And I'll give them different solutions like, hey, for example, if you're a business owner and you say over the past year, I'll give an example of a client recently. He was a copywriter and he was trying to get more clients. I think this was like October and he wanted to get more clients by December. I think he wanted to get like 4 new clients or something. And prior to him being in Productivity Accelerator, he had like 1 client like in January, but he hadn't been able to get any more from that point on. So I said to him, that 1 client you have, what did you do to get him? And he said, oh, well, I would go on Upwork. He was a freelancer. I would go on Upwork and I'd just take an hour and I'd send out pitches to the different agencies. And then eventually one would hire me. And so I would say, I'm not a copywriter, but the thing you did the first time that worked, why don't you just do more of that thing? And because at the time, like we would sit there and I would evaluate, and I do this with all my clients. I evaluate what they do every day. And you find a lot of people just don't do the things that they need to be doing. Yeah. I want to get more clients for my business. So why did you spend 6 hours on social media? So, and again, it sounds basic and it is a little bit basic, but you'd be surprised at how much time people kind of waste on things that don't matter. And then when you sit there and say like, the thing you want, how much time are you putting towards just doing that thing? They'll sit there and it's like a light bulb like appears over their head and like, oh, you know what? I should do more of that thing, right? So for a client, I told him, I said, from now on, what I want you to do is at least take an hour per day. Just pitch. That's it. Just pitch. And you'd be surprised. It took a while for us to get him to just pitch because he'd find something to do to fill up that time. I woke up and I decided to watch TV. That's not pitching. No TV. Pitch. Oh, I woke up and I went to the gym. Self-improvement, I'm at the gym. Cool. You went to the gym, but your goal is not to get in better shape. Your goal is to get more clients. Pitch.
oh, I woke up and I started practicing copywriting. That's perfectly fine. You're a copywriter. You should practice. But the goal was not to practice copywriting because you're good enough to get a client. So that's not the issue that you claim. Your goal is to get clients. So pitch. So that's kind of the approach I take. I'm not telling him what to write as a copywriter, or, I've had some clients who do project management, things of that nature. Whatever your goal is, I don't tell you how to do the thing specifically. I just try to get you to do more of what's working or what you believe can work. And we're kind of in that journey together, me and the client, trying to figure out like what does work, what doesn't work. No one knows exactly what works for anything. I think that's kind of just how life is, but hopefully that answers the question. I'm just trying to get them to do more of what works best from what they can tell. Hopefully that answered it for them.
I believe it did. He responded and let us know. Oh, and locked in. Great answer. Cool beans. Put it up. Thanks, Mike, so much for your comments, man. And then just appreciate you on the show, man. And that's for everyone else. If you're watching the show, please comment accordingly. With your journey, of changing your minds, getting these pillars, this concept. I noticed in one of your past interviews when I was researching you and looking you up, you said you kind of like referenced the movie Limitless.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, you said being limitless doesn't need to come from an external force. The true secret to being limitless is having an absolute belief in yourself that you can come up with an answer to any problem you face. And my question to you is, how do you practice that kind of self-belief in your own life, especially when you encounter new challenges every day? How did you instill that into that limitless into your mindset?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I love the movie Limitless. I've watched it endless times. To this day, I can watch it like every other week. Yeah. So as far as like me installing that into my mind, I'll be honest, I kind of just stole it from Limitless. I was watching one day, and after I think the 100th time of me watching, I was kind of just thinking about the movie, and I thought to myself, like, the movie doesn't, I don't think, imply this, but this is kind of how I interpreted it. I thought to myself, like, the pill doesn't make you smarter.
Yeah.
It just makes you believe that you'll have an answer to whatever problem comes up.
Yeah. Which
to me is like, if that's the case, everyone could be limitless because everyone could just have a belief that the thing they want to do can be done. I kind of think I just watched the movie and just applied it to my own life. It was kind of like a rationalization, like, oh, well, if I took like a random vitamin D pill, believed it was a limitless pill, and believed that today at the gym I could crank out an extra 2 sets, or if I'm out of shape and I feel like I can learn how to get in shape by taking this pill, I don't know, it's the same concept. Yeah, I don't really have like a specific thing I did to kind of foster that belief. I think it was just more of a rationalization that if you can have that belief, why not have that belief? Like, why not just apply it? I will say, like, I do like to, I don't know if I'm like going all, maybe I'm like moving away too much from the question, but I do like to picture myself as, I'll say, a better version of who I already am. Like, I'll give an example. When I'm at the gym, this might sound super geeky. I picture myself as like a superhero. Like in my mind, I picture myself as like this jacked dude who can like lift. And I literally say to myself in my head, like, I have unlimited energy and I'm like a superhuman. It sounds geeky and it sounds like kind of, I think, nerdy. Like I'll literally go to the gym and like blast, if anyone knows like Bleach, the #1 song, like Ichigo's theme song, I'll blast it at the gym. The reason why I do that though is because I truly do believe that like how you perceive yourself affects how you behave.
True.
I like history a bit. I'm not like a history buff, but I do like to study a little bit of history. And I remember I read a few books on Alexander the Great. And if you want to talk about a dude who had crazy self-belief in himself and was almost borderline delusional, Alexander was one of those guys.
Yeah.
And according to different like historians, he would literally, like, he thought he was the son of Zeus. And I don't think that was, like, he had a father, of course. He knew his father, but he still believed that that father of his wasn't his real father. He thought to himself, no, this is a fake father. My real father is Zeus, a god. And if my father's Zeus, a god, I'm also a god. Therefore, I can do anything that a god can do. And it sounds ridiculous and it sounds wacky, But when I think about it, I think to myself, this dude conquered basically most of the known planet. Like you don't do that by having an average like mindset.
Mindset. Yeah. 100%.
So like if his belief led him to, if his delusional belief, which is I guess from his time period, basically fiction, or maybe I guess maybe they wouldn't have seen gods as a fiction like that, like Zeus is fiction, but hopefully anyone listening gets the point that I'm making. If him viewing himself as the son of Zeus led him to pretty much conquer the planet, I think me believing that I'm a superhuman, like I got bit by a radioactive spider or something like that,
Yeah.
could at least help me in like my gym goals or my finance goals or my personal life goals. So I don't know. That's kind of just the way I see it.
And you're right. And it's amazing. But one thing I would say about Alexander, right? He had this unquenchable thirst. And, you kind of said something like that similar. You said, despite all your achievements, you admitted that I'm never really satisfied. You said, certainly I'm happy, and then I'm content, but never really satisfied. That kind of relentless drive can be a blessing and a curse for some people, right? So how do you channel that relentless ambition into a positive action, like in your goals and your projects that you're doing, while not letting it turn into burnout and constant dissatisfaction?
So I've thought a lot about that because kind of still like talking about Alexander the Great.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of his greatest strengths, but I think that was one of his greatest weaknesses as well. Not to be like a nerd, and I'm not saying that I know like history that well,
Yeah.
but I recall like reading that at one point when Alexander the Great was kind of like done his main conquest, he had like a bit of Africa, I think a bit of Greece, a bit of like, I guess modern day Iran. He had them all unified. He was pretty much playing like the role of king. And from my understanding, he just kind of got bored with it. He didn't like the idea of trying to merge the different cultures together, the different languages, and make it all work. And at some point, long story short, someone brought up to him, hey, there's this other territory, I think modern day India. There's this other territory over there. What do we do about it? And he said, oh, he pretty much, the way I always read it, like I picture he kind of just got up in his chair. He was like, more places to conquer. Let's go. And they were like, not the best idea. You're good. Like, you got plenty right here. This is good enough. He goes, long story short, the way he died is debated. Some people say he got sick. Some people say he died in battle from like a wound. Some people say he just kind of died from exhaustion. I like to think that he probably got wounded in battle, and he wouldn't admit it, so his followers didn't spread that story to, make his legacy look good. But when I hear that, I think to myself, there's a certain limit of pushing yourself too hard and kind of being too bold or going to too many extremes. And I've thought to myself, the way to counter that, if you're someone who's like really ambitious, is to make your goals, like all that ambition should be channeled to just making yourself as good as possible without worrying about everyone or everything else. So if he had gone from the perspective of, I'm not going to be a conqueror anymore, but I am going to be the best kind of role model for my soldiers, or maybe the best mentor or teacher, something like that. Something where it allows him to grow as much as he wants to without going to war with other people or getting into conflict with other people, within reason. I think that's the best kind of way to challenge that ambition or that energy. The way I try to do it now, things like making a comic, that's what I do. Because I feel like it's a 1 versus 1 type game, and the only person I'm competing against is myself. Like, I'm not trying to be better than every other comic book artist out there. I don't care. I like their art, and I like to reference it. I like to learn from them. But I don't want to be necessarily better than them. Same with music. My goal one day is to like write my own album and like teach myself like different instruments. That way I can, one of my goals is like to do all the instruments on the album. I'm not trying to be the best musician. I'm not trying to be the next Jimi Hendrix or Michael Jackson or whoever, Kurt Cobain, whoever you want to name. But I am trying to take all the ambition that I have and just channel it into making myself as good as I possibly can, solely for my own pleasure and for my own growth. So that's kind of my answer to that. Hopefully, again, that wasn't too off tangent.
Oh, no, 100%. I trust me, I love the tangents because it allows for, again, I don't want to, like you say, I don't want to say deep thought, but it allows for thought. You know what I'm saying? Nothing is these, copied answers, right? These are tried, tested, through you and how, you experience through life. So 100%. It's pretty cool. And I'll end it, this podcast with this question. because you was talking about life, you was talking about being a better leader, and then it makes me think about leaving a legacy. And it's like looking ahead, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind when all is said and done? What do you hope people will remember about Lenny Richardson and the impact you have made through your work, through your stories, and through your journey? Yeah.
I think the legacy I'd like to leave is just that I push the boundaries of what like a single person can do. I think that's always been something I've been trying to deep down accomplish. Like really trying to maximize all of those like pillars, health, wealth, and relationships, and take them to the extremes as much as possible.
Yeah.
I think when I pass away, I'd like to be known as the guy who was weird enough and ambitious enough to make like a really well-respected comic, a well-respected album, start a successful business while being in good shape and being a good social dude,
Yeah.
but also not being like a dick towards other people. I think that'd be like a good legacy to leave behind.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And everybody, this is Lenny Richardson. And with that said, anything that you got going on that you want to promote, you want to have our listeners go to and be a part of, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. If anyone's interested in Productivity Accelerator, if they feel like they have goals they want to achieve, but they're not getting them done, I actually just on our website, productivityaccelerator.org, there's sort of a free like 7-day course you can take. It's sort of like a step-by-step process to kind of just getting your goals done. I break down like the science behind it and kind of I call it the 3 scientifically backed ways to achieve any goal that you want. And so far, science has confirmed that this will help you achieve any goal you want. So productivityaccelerator.org is where you can find that. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, they can reach me on my personal website, lennyrichandson.online. Or they can find me on Instagram at LeviticusRich. I will say if you do message me, I check my emails more than I check my social media. So if you DM me on Instagram, it might take like a week for me to respond because I try my best to limit social media. But yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate you. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That's another one. Peace.